Your host, Rispa Karoe. I'm here once again in a new week, and I feel so blessed this morning. I don't know about you, whomever, wherever you are watching from. I just hope that you are doing well. I know most of our places there could be some kind of changes in weather patterns, but wherever you are, make sure you have a cup of coffee near you as you tune in to listen to this wonderful program that you're about to start this morning. I don't want to take much of your time because I want to make sure that we go right into the details. I remember last week, a time like this, we were discussing about what are thoughts and the types of thoughts that human beings have. Now, I want to say that I was not able to finish up all the type of thoughts. I think tuliachia hapo kwa negative thoughts na positive thoughts. But for today, allow me briefly to discuss about the topic I was talking about last week. It is an amazing topic. Stay there. Don't wander off. Focus. It is going to be brief. It is going to be wonderful. And let me start by saying that the topic was about how the brain create new ideas. That is what we are going to discuss today. And I'm going to partition it into segments in a form of a way like asking a question and then we answer it and then we try to understand. So for me, I've been doing most of my research, looking into how the various brain researchers on how they were handling the topic. And amazingly, I came across this wonderful brain researcher by the name Henning Beng. And he was able to have a well analyzed way of explaining how the brain create new ideas. I was able to understand his research in a good way. That's why I chose to focus on his research specifically. So for me, I'm going to share some of the insights that I was able to acquire by studying about this amazing brain researcher. He had something wonderful. Now, I'm going to start by asking ourselves this question: what goes on in our mind? And this question is going to help us to understand the entire thing on how the brain creates new ideas. So we have to first understand what goes on in our mind. And let me start by saying that it's all about information. It is the information that we acquire that give rise to new thoughts. So that's basically how we get to have our thoughts rising up. So information is the same like kind of a data. Data is the resource of the 21st century. It is basically everywhere. Everywhere, information is everywhere nowadays. If you want to Google something, you just get into your phone. You're going to use internet and you're going to Google a specific idea or information that you want to acquire. So that's how most of the times us as human beings we think about how the information is acquired. So for me, I would like to start by saying that having an idea, inquiring knowledge, understanding stuff, that is what that happens in our mind. Having an idea, acquiring knowledge, understanding stuff. But when you use information, you change the way you think. But I want you to understand this specific thing, that we cannot mix up information with having an idea or knowledge, because information is everywhere. You can Google information and you're going to get the results instantly. And it is quite much different na with having an idea or acquiring knowledge. So I hope that you are all able to understand na mnaweza kuelewa ni inaanza na mahali pa kukua kuna habari unapokea. Na hiyo ndo nimeweza kusema inapatikana kwa mitandao, na hiyo ndo ninasema habari ambayo utapata kwa mitandao kwa urahisi, na hatuwezi iliganisha na kukua na wazo ama kuelewa mambo na kujua mambo kwa urahisi. So I hope that it is everyone is understanding about what happens in the mind. So the next segment, we are going to ask ourselves this question: what is going on when we think? Mahali yuko, I know you are seated somewhere, and I'm very sure that you are surrounded by things around you, and they could be various. Zinaweza kuwa ni vitu kadhaa zenye ziko karibu na wewe, but you are able to see them. For example, if I'm thinking of a picture, tuseme kama ninafikiria kuhusu kiti, iyo kiti yenye ninafikiria, that picture ikikuwa in my mind, my brain is able to register it, and I'm able to shift from one image to another in a faster way, and it is very much easier compared to a computer. So that is how I want to discuss it in a way that every one of us ataweza kuelewa what is going on when we think, na nimepeana na hiyo mfano ya mambo yenye inakuzingira. So ukiangalia, for example, a computer, you can easily calculate using a computer. You can key in your data and you can get the result easily. But ikikuja ni kwa akili yetu, our brain, we have brain cells. We cannot compare it to you cannot compare a computer to our brains, because our brain, there are cells that are in our brain and they are much slower. So whereby you will find that a computer, it is easier for it to make mistakes, but for a brain, it is prone to making mistakes every now and then, and it can make as much mistakes as often as compared to a computer. So our brain is very much unique, and we have to understand from that perspective ati ukilinganisha akili yetu na computer there is something unique about computers, because when you want to use a computer, you're just going to plug into the internet. I know this is something yenye most of us tunajua. You will just plug into the internet and you are going to expose yourself to the world. Anything that you key in, you are going to find the results if you have the internet around you. But what about the brain? The brain, we cannot, it is the opposite. We are not plugging it somewhere. It is self-oriented. Self-oriented, it is the one that is responsible for generating itself, because it have brain cells that are connected to our nerve, such that there are nerve fibers that can actually, they never get out of our skull. So when we see from that perspective, we're able to see that for a computer to make a mistakes, it is very much often maybe one time in a trillion times, and one error most often. But for the brain, most of the time, we tend to make mistakes here and then, and that's what is unique with our brain. So the brain is everything, but perfect. But what the point I want to drive home is how to recognize things is interesting. What is interesting is how fast you do it, not that you just do it. So brain cells are very slow. We cannot compare them to the computer, because you can perform 20 to that operations, but for a computer you need more steps to get to the results, because to get to the same result as using a brain. And that is how it is totally different from anything that we know in the world. We cannot compare our human brain with the computer, though the computers are the most efficient. Nowadays we have the AI generated machines, whereby you just key in anything that you want to find in the internet. But how does a brain solve a problem compared to a computer? That is another question that we need to ask ourselves, because a computer will simply approach a problem using an algorithm. Algorithm is stepwise recipes telling you what to do. It's like there's some instructions that are keyed in, they're inside, so they are conditioned in a way that they will give you the directions on how you are supposed to do it. So it is like kind of an input and output process. You process the input according to algorithm, according to the stepwise, and finally you reach to an output. So it is basically input processing input. Nikiongea kwa Kiswahili ninasema ni kwamba wakati computer ina solve mambo, inakuanga imekondishoniwa inawe iko na mambo ambayo inaitwa algorithm. Ni kama instructions zenye zinakusaidia wewe uweze kureach to the results, na usipotumia hizo steps kutakuwa na a mistake. So it is a great method when you don't make mistakes, when you don't do it at the beginning. So when you make a mistake with a computer in the beginning, because you have to follow the stepwise, in the beginning you'll be screwed at the end. If you did not key in the right thing in the beginning, even the results will be screwed in. That's why unapataga sometimes computers can break down and end up in a blue screen. So you can see that our brains are not wired like a computer. We don't have to be like computers to process information, because computers, they have algorithms. That's why they are faster, efficient, and they can be able to give immediate results. But our brain is most of the times is very much self-oriented. So you can see that a computer can break down just because of a mistake that you did in the beginning. But for our brains, do they just break down? No, they cannot. It cannot just happen like that, because the only time that the brain has ever broken down, it's when an external force was applied, or when you have used excessive alcohol. That's the only time that your brain can break down. But most of the times, brains will dig with a trick, and that's happened through the input. Remember that if the computer, the input, you're using algorithms and the receipt steps to show you, to guide you into getting into the results. Our brains, we use our input. Input, it is that yenye ina hit macho yetu, such that my sensory cells, remember last time I talked about our senses. Our senses refer to our eyes, nose, ears, taste, smell. Those our senses, those are basically our senses. And when our sensory cells are actuated, they actuate the neighbors and the neural network. That's whereby we find that the brain is in action. Our brain is like it's the central nervous system. It's like the engine of the brain. whereby all the commands are centered, whereby they will command what other parts of the body are supposed to functions, such that their electro impulses, their nerves that are connected, electro impulses that they give rise to that information, such that it directs it to any part of the brain. That's why unafidigi, there is a point whereby you'd want to stretch your arm. Of course, it is communication that is being communicated from the brain to your nerve cells. So there is those brain nerve fibers that are in your brain. So when you acquire information using your senses, that it gets actuated, and that's when the brain it's in action. So brain cells are dumb on their own and cannot do anything much. So they adapt in their own, but if you have a lot of them, those brain cells, you'll end up with something we call an activity pattern. That activity pattern is what we are calling a thought. That is very much different. There is a very big difference to a computer, because the brain doesn't distinguish between processing information, because that is the thought by itself. But that is how we are able to compare it with a computer, because the computer, you have to input using an algorithm, and then you get the result. But for the brain, it is the brain cells, and when you're having a lot of them, that's when there is an activity pattern, and that is what we call a thought. It's, for example, your brain. We can give an example of your brain, comparing it to an orchestra. An orchestra is a group of people with different instruments, maybe violin, and they are set, maybe they're somewhere whereby they're supposed to play the music. So an orchestra, so when you look from the point of an orchestra, you are seeing that there are different musicians. They have set up the instruments, and for them to be able to create a melody, we don't know what that orchestra, we don't know the specific thing that the orchestra is going to produce, the music that is going to produce. And that is how the brain is. When we don't know exactly what kind of a thought is going to produce, but from outside we don't have any clue, unless the musicians synchronize themselves and start playing the instrument. That's when we'll know that there is an activity taking place. And then that's when we start seeing that we compare that to our brain, that at that moment that there is nothing that happening, unless that synchronizing of harmonizing of those instruments and the production of the music to come by. If that is only the time that that music will be produced. It is also happen with the brain. When the brain cells are too much, they are too much, when they are synchronizing themselves within the brain, that's when a thought is produced, which we are calling an activity pattern. So a thought in a brain is among the brain cells when they synchronize themselves. That is the simplest way that we can define it. So, which means that a thought is not just located anywhere, because a thought is how the brain cells interact and how they process the information. That's just the orchestra is interacting to producing that music. So, for us to produce a thought, there is that interaction of the brain cells. So, what are we learning from this process of how a thought is created, or what happens in our minds? It means that when we look it and compare it to a computer, computers are intelligent, but intelligence is nothing special, because it means that you are following the rules. And knowing that to be intelligent means that you're going to be fast, efficient as possible, but you're not going to change the rules. And that's what happened with the computer. It is fast, efficient, but remember, there are those specific recipes, the algorithm that you are using to create the results. So it is very fast, intelligence, instant results, but the rules are still the same. So that's why we are told that hakutawahi kuwa na a super intelligent computer that will ever rule the world, because intelligence is not enough. So for us as human beings with our unique brain that is self-oriented, it means that we have to rely on our thinking, because an idea, we cannot compare it with gaining information, because you can measure data, because you can get everywhere, because companies measure data everywhere. We collect data, we analyze, we correlate it, but we cannot compare it with having an idea, because we cannot measure an idea, because our brains, they can have so many thousands of thoughts going on in our brain, but it is only one idea that is worth to bring a change. So which doesn't happen with computers. Our brains don't need that much of the ruling. We don't have to think like a computer to have an idea worth fulfilling for our purpose and destinies in our lives. So which means that most of the times in this age of time, when we try to think like computers, the more we'll not be able to have the worthful ideas to analyze our situation and our problems, because we tend to think that we are not supposed to make a mistake. So we need to break a rule with our brains, because most of the times mistakes is in our thinking, but it's not the perfection. So that is what that separates us from the machines. The machines, they most of the times they tend to be efficient, fast, perfect, but for human beings, most of the times, because our brain is lousy, it is selfish, most of the times we'll find ourselves making mistakes. So what do you mean by a mistakes? Mistakes is just simply that you are coming up with a new thought, a new activity pattern, without even knowing before whether it is correct or not. You get a new pattern, a new thought, you don't know whether it is correct or not. So which means that we will try, we will fail, we do it again, and there is no objective or criteria for a good idea, which means that we find ourselves today, you have done this, you have failed, tomorrow you try, until the day you'll feel that this is the most concept thinking that I have, that it can be valuable to me and to another people. So most of the times, because of trying to compare ourselves with computer, we tend to deviate from making mistakes all the time, and we are not wired like that. We are not wired like computers. So for us to be able that we have a good idea, it means that we have to have a social interaction, so that we have that concept thinking. And how do you create new ideas? For example, we have chairs of different designs. Like for example, here I'm seated, my chair it doesn't have the four stand. Unasema tunasemanga kukuwa na miguu minne. So tunakuanga na hiyo mentality ya kama if I'm talking about a chair, I'm reflecting upon maybe iko na miguu nne, but we have not in our lives hatujaona tu ati kiti yenye iko tu na miguu minne. We have different designs of chairs, and when you can feed that kind of information in a computer, for example, a computer will analyze the whole data when you ask it what a chair is all about, and 98% certainty itasema that a chair is an objective with 4 legs, a seat and a back seat, when you feed that information. But for us, do we understand that as a chair? We understand that a chair is not a special shaped object, but something you can sit on. So this is the difference with a human being and a computer. We tend to understand more than to analyze the fact that this is a chair that has four legs, but because a computer it's wired in a way that it has been instructed to give information in a specific way, that's where it will give you such kind of an information. But for you, with your normal thinking, you understand that a chair is somewhere you can sit on. So, and once you understand that, you start seeing chairs everywhere you go. So computers, most of the time, they do learn, but learning is not as that special, because even animals learn. So we've had experienced animals which have learned different tactics. For example, ukiangalia in our security department in the country, there are some dogs that are trained. They have learned on how to inspect various things, maybe like a bomb yenye inaweza leta madhara kwa wanadamu. So that is, animals can learn, even computers learn. But when you learn something as a human being, you can unlearn it. We are all aware that there are some things zenye ulikuwa unajua kitabu, but the moment you are exposed to different information, you are able to unlearn some things and you are able to learn new things. But for an individual to be able to be comfortable with their lives, most of the times we have to understand things. And when you understand something, it is not easy to understand it. For example, when this brain researcher was talking about this topic on how the brain create ideas, he was saying that there's a time that her 2-year neighbor visited and got into his house, and the first thing that the 2-year-old boy was able to notice is a smoke detector. And he was like, a 2-year-old, where did he know? Alijulia wapi mambo ya smoke detectors? And he was like, are his parents showing him the smoke detectors everywhere? But he came to understand that children, when they see something, they learn it very fast, and it is not, they understand it, and it is not easy for them to understand it. That's why you are able to see that 2-year-old boy, he was able to understand a smoke detector. So when he goes somewhere, you'll be able to know this is a smoke detector. It was not just learning that took place, but he was able to understand that this is a smoke detector. So with all that, we shall go to our next question because of time. How do we make use of the brain to stay creative and innovative? We don't have to be like computers. Many people nowadays think that when you work harder, faster, or more efficient to solve problems, that is the best way. But that's how machines do. We are human beings. Every efficient procedure will be replaced by algorithms eventually. What cannot be replaced by inefficient thinking, integrating new ideas, or giving rise to understanding stuff. We can never compare it with that kind of algorithm use that the computer use. But all in our lives, there are times that we'll have an inefficient thinking. There are so many times that we'll integrate new ideas and we rise to understanding stuff. So for us to be able even to understand stuff, how can we do that? It means that we have to take breaks, we sleep, we lose attention, focus, get distracted. But after that, we're going to step back and see the things from a different context. That's what I'm calling understanding things. Even after doing whatever that I've done, I want to stand back and try to see it from a different perspective. And if you only dig into the data, just rely on data is information, and never step back to take time off to understand the whole picture of it, you will never make sense of it. So the thing here, it's not only about acquiring information, it is also about stepping back and looking at the whole picture so that you can be able to make sense of it. Human beings, we are built in a way that it is not all about learning but also understanding stuff. And where and most of the people, they ask, where did you get this idea from? And when you hear people saying that, maybe someone who have started something unique, and you want to inquire more, how did this come about, where did this idea come from, and most of the people will comfortably answer is when they were doing something boring, like for example maybe doing their shows, or maybe under the shower, or maybe when they are doing their sports. That is the time that they were able to attract new ideas, which means that we should dig into the problem, focus on the task, get involved, and step back. Do something unrelated, know a new problem, and just chill, because nowadays we are surrounded by so many inconvenient and aspiring opinions. Like for example, when you get to social media, your Facebook has algorithm filters and they will show you online posts that are suitable to you. So most of the times you'll having the information that is always suitable to you, and you'll have friends that you share most of the times the very similar opinions. And if you want to get a newspaper, you'll want to read the section that yenye inakufurahishaga sana. So when you use social media or TV online, we confirm our beliefs but never challenge them. So as human beings, we gain information just for the sake of gaining information, but we don't get a chance to challenge this information that we are gaining. So for you to be able to gain new ideas, or to be crazy and creative nowadays, you have to try and provoke yourself from time to time, which means that it will give you the rise into ideas and information from the perspective of understanding it. You read something that you disagree with. When you read something that you disagree with, you are giving rise to that idea and information on countering the problem or whatever that you feel that is not right with that information. But nowadays, most of us, we have found ourselves just wanting to be surrounded by things that we like only. And by that, we find ourselves that we are in a place of complacency. We are not able to think of new ideas and how to generate them. And we don't want to make mistakes. We want to be like, I'm the good, I'm always right, I'm the best. That is not going to help us as human beings, because brain is a robust machine. It is very selfish sometimes. So we need to read something that you disagree with. You have to have a productive argument with a friend. When was the last time that you had a productive argument with someone? It is not about whether I'm the right person, just that productive argument. You are exercising the brain cells, and you are able to know that, why am I thinking like this? How is it helping me by thinking like this? So you try also to see things from other side. When someone says something, try to step back and try to understand things. Don't think like an algorithm. An algorithm is specific instructions. You try to challenge your opinions and ideas instead of confirming them. Try to break the thinking instead of following the rules. Try to break the thinking rules. When you break the thinking rules, you'll open yourself up to a world whereby you're able to generate ideas without even wondering whether I'm making a mistake or not, because you're generating them from inside. What is the next idea that is worth spreading? We don't know yet, but we can be pretty sure that it will be created by our brains, not because we are smarter, faster, or more intelligent than computer, but it is the opposite. We are slower, irrational, imperfect. That's why we understand the world instead of analyzing it. that is what that makes us human in general. So I've already finished talking about the topic. I've already explained to you, my dear viewers, how the brain create ideas. And there is some points that I want to summarize by saying this. How do we think of these great new ideas that are worth spreading? Meaning that we have information around us, and most of that is the most basic thing that give rise to our thoughts. But don't forget that information can be measured, but we cannot measure our ideas. We have to be unique as human beings. We don't have to think like computers. We cannot always be always that we are efficient, fast. No, we are the opposite of the computers. We are self-match oriented. The brain is self-oriented. So which means that you can measure data, but you cannot measure an idea. Brain cells are dumb on their own and cannot do anything much, because those nerves, those fibers, they don't get out. They are still inside your skull. So our brains need also, for us to be able to rejuvenate and to be able to have a well conversed integrative ideas, it means that we need rest. Our brains need rest, get enough sleep, and that is going to help you to generate good thoughts. Not only thoughts, but good positive thoughts to help you move forward in your life. And brain cells are dumb on their own. They cannot do anything much. If you have a lot of them, you end up with something we'll call an activity pattern. Those brain cells, they are nothing much. But when you have a lot of them, that's when you are able to have that activity pattern, and that's what we are calling a thought. The activity pattern is what we call a thought, and a thought is not just located anywhere. A thought is how the brain cells interact and how they process the information, how those brain cells interact and how they process the information. Another point that I want you to take home is that computers are intelligent, but intelligence is nothing special. Intelligence means you follow the rules as fast and as efficiency as possible, but not to change the rules. For us to be able to have deep learning, and deep learning is very great, we have to take it from a place of deep understanding, and deep understanding is the best way that you can be able to process information, not simply like thinking like an algorithm or like a computer. So another thing that I would also to finish up with is, when we are having a challenge or a problem that you are going through, dig into the problem, focus on the task, get involved, then step back, do something unrelated, try to provoke yourself from time to time, read something that you disagree with. So with all that information, I hope you'll be able to understand your thoughts in a more efficient way, na hautasema ati hii yenye nafikiria ni baya. Our brains are prone to making mistakes even a billion times. So you should not worry about making mistakes. Don't concentrate on how people are saying about you. There are some kind of beliefs that are in us that we acquired basically because we had other people saying, or we felt like that is the rules that we are supposed to follow. Break the rules pattern. Allow yourself to make the mistakes, because thinking is being done inwardly. Step back and try to understand what you are thinking about, and with that you'll be able to have an easy time understanding your thoughts. And that is why I've been here all along talking about Thought Life series. I hope that is going to help you over the weekend, even the next week. I'm so glad and so happy that I have helped someone somewhere. Go teach someone. Be there. Don't overthink about anything. Even after this, I'm going to look back and reflect on what that I was doing, and then I'm going to to tell myself, yes, I could have made a mistake here, 1, 2 or 3 mistakes, but I will be able to appreciate myself because I know I'm growing, and the only way that I can grow is by deeper learning and understanding. I hope that from today, whatever that you'll be exposing yourself to, you'll be able to learn and try to look it back and understand, because we human beings, we can never be like computers. So thank you so much for listening. Let us meet not next week. Next week we'll be having a conference, so Jesus Healing Campaign meeting. It will be on Gatanga constituency, so we are all there, headed there. We'll be going specifically to take healing. That is the mandate of our IHEM ministry. So next week we will not be together, but you can rewatch these videos and try to understand what we've been talking about from the first video that we made. Then next week, part 1, we are going to resume on our food for thought program, and we will continue on discussing about our thoughts. I will continue discussing about types of thoughts, and specifically I'm going to deal with the most part segment of the negative and positive thoughts. So prepare yourself. Until next time, I'm your dear host, Rispa.